Today is February 25th, 2024. Welcome to Native Calgarian. Oki, Naganago, Mekoche, Chestakom Aki, or Dekot Nagot Tiene Siku. My name is Red Thunder Woman. My married English name is Michelle Robinson. I use she and they pronouns. I honor the Blackfoot as the elders and members have been so kind to me on my Red Road journey. Elder Red Crane taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Blackfoot, and Leonard Kenny taught me how to pronounce my spirit name in Satu Dene. My humblest apologies to the Blackfoot and Dene elders and language keepers as I try to learn proper pronunciation. My Dene lineage roots me in the land of the Great Bear Lake tribe in Treaty 11. My people wore rabbit skins, so it's been referred to as the land of the Hare people. I'm a native to Turtle Island, and my Dene nation is uninvited to this area of Clincho Tine Indahe in Satu Dene, meaning many big dog town, named after the Calgary Stampede. I was born in Calgary or in Blackfoot, Mohkinstsis, as Michelle Elliott, an English name that has afforded me privilege in an English colonial world. My mother is Northern Slavey Dene or Satu Dene, but my Indian Act and Post status card by the Canadian government says Yellowknives Dene. Through my father, I am a daughter of the Mayflower and a daughter of the American Revolution while having a Canadian Indian Act and Post status card, which is a colonial construct by Canadian policies meant to divide Indigenous peoples' inherent rights. Indigenous Two-Spirit or the Indigenous 2S LGBTQ community and Indigenous women are at the bottom of the Canadian socioeconomic ladder because of colonial trauma, imposed poverty, racism, gendered violence, and land theft. According to the 2023 Quality of Life report from the Calgary Foundation, 31% of racialized Calgarians cannot find suitable employment. I'm not a social worker, not an elder, and I do not speak on behalf of all Indigenous, but I share what I am learning as I walk my journey. As a trauma-informed Dene woman who has attempted to run, joined harmful colonial parties, spent money to be at expensive conventions, left my home to travel to those conventions, just to vote on incomplete policies that still allow for incarceration, a denial of justice, a denial of healthcare services, racism, colonial trauma, and genocide of Indigenous and Black peoples, I have work to continue, reports to advocate for, and attempt to work within these systems meant to harm me and my community. I think of all of this today. I hope we honor the many Indigenous lives lost for the so-called country named Canada. I hope you see your role in the importance of stopping harm, and as a citizen, see your role in reconciliation and as a treaty partner. Pride Month should never just be 1 month. It is important to understand the straight agenda and gendered violence was and is forced on these lands by Christian outsiders. Land acknowledgements are critical for creating a safer space for Indigenous, as well as honoring the host as a guest and acknowledging your role as a treaty partner in a so-called time of reconciliation. Can they be performative? Of course. It's important that they have that meaning. I encourage everyone to introduce themselves with an acknowledgement of their ancestors, stories of displacement, how you perceive your role as a treaty partner, citizen of Canada, a refugee, or other land displacement, so we as Indigenous peoples know how safe you are to be around. If you won't pronounce your local Indigenous nation's name, won't say your pronouns, won't say your story of origin, won't acknowledge stolen lands, won't acknowledge imposed economic oppression or your role in reconciliation, I determine how safe you are to be around my community, my family, and myself. Understanding land acknowledgements and their importance is Indigenous 101 because it immediately addresses colonialism, oppression dynamics, broken treaties, and lies taught today in Canadian schools nationally. That's why settlers and those who call themselves Native Calgarians or whatever town you're from, you show me you have no Indigenous 101 understanding. Jesse Winty's book Unreconciled explains it perfectly, as do many other Indigenous authored books. Land Back is a movement that could save the planet from imposed climate change by colonialism, capitalism, but it would be a part of a treaty partnership, part of meaningful reconciliation, honoring global initiatives like the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples. I'm speaking to you on the lands of the Niitsitapi, which is the Blackfoot Confederacy. The Blackfoot south of the imposed U.S.-Canadian border are the Blackfeet, north of the border are the Siksika, Kainai, and Piikani of the Confederacy. These lands are Treaty 7, signed September 22nd, 1877, with signatures that include the Blackfoot Confederacy, the Goodstoney, Chiniki, and Bearspaw nations of the Stoney, and the Dene from Tsuut'ina. I acknowledge all First Nation, Métis, Inuit status and non-status across Turtle Island as the keepers of these lands, all non-Indigenous or treaty partners with the government signing on your behalf. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian, where you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing any support. Just so you know, today, out of all days, we took some of that money and gave it to the topic we're going to be talking about today. So if you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. Also, giving a review helps, whatever medium you're listening from. I have a YouTube channel where you can subscribe, or you can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. Today, I want to start with as you all know, I actually hate trigger warnings because I think they're redundant. I think every BIPOC, QT BIPOC in this country, their lives are trigger warnings to white people, unfortunately. But for anybody who's listening that wants to understand this topic, this one is going to be really hard for transphobia, sexual assault, murder, and just colonial violence in general. So if you're not in the right headspace, maybe skip to the resources at the end. And with that, I want to welcome our guest and let them introduce themselves in their way and go from there. So thank you so much for coming, Ali.
Hi. Wow, what an act to follow. Like you really knew your shit.
Yeah,
Oh.
no, I talk about this at every one. It's so funny because like I go to these protests and stuff and people will be like, "Oh yeah, I know I see you on the internet all the time." But it's like, I know you don't listen to me what you just fucking said.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was incredible because I am so bad with introductions. It's like anytime it's like, tell me about yourself. I'm like, you know. But thankfully I wrote it down though.
Yeah,
Also,
right on.
do you because I know I got my microphone right here. Are you hearing an echo at all on my end or no? Okay,
No,
good.
and my husband's really good at editing. He
Mhm.
plays with it all the time, and it's fun to kind of watch. It doesn't make any sense, and I'll nerd people out with it, and I don't even know it. So, but yeah, he just like if we start laughing as we always do as Native women,
Mhm.
he knows how to like make the squiggle lines smaller so it's not too crazy for other folks. And but you still get the good laughter and stuff. So yeah, I get really good feedback from people who listen that he edits it really nice so that it sounds really good.
Okay, that's good. I was just worried. I was like, oh
Yeah.
man, what if she's like hearing an echo? But if you're not, then I'll continue.
Yeah, that's great.
All right. I am Ali Nahdee. I am Anishinaabe, specifically Ojibwe. I'm a writer from Detroit, but my family is from the Wapule Island First Nation Reserve in Ontario. I'm best known for creating the AILA test, which is now called the Ali Nahdee test back in 2017. I used to do freelance writing for Indian Country Today, but I mostly just run a blog and have dabbled a bit in the world of video essays, which I plan to get back into the swing of as soon as I'm able. Just a lot has been going on.
Yeah,
Um,
fair.
in the context of this specific conversation, I was a Native student who attended predominantly non-Native schools with racist non-Native teachers. Not all of them, but enough. It was the 90s, so you know.
I feel you.
Yeah. When I worked at a previous job, I was a coach. So I was a native coach to predominantly non-native children between the ages of 3 and 12, sometimes 13. I identify as Indigiqueer and I was closeted for like a big majority of my life. And every aspect of who I am and who I used to be and who I want to become, I feel is really relevant to my emotions surrounding this situation.
Hmm.
Mhm.
So I guess the best way,
My
and
cat is interrupting.
oh,
So
kitties are
like,
allowed. All four-legged medicine is good
yes.
medicine. I
Okay, good
think
to
our
know.
Yeah, I
Yes.
think our dogs, and well, I have dogs, and they just know when you're upset, right? And so
Yeah.
they'll come. And yeah, so for folks who don't know, we're going to be talking about a young two-spirit 16-year-old that was in Oklahoma that was murdered by three young uh so-called friends. I when I'm reading is breaking my heart, but part of the reason why I thought it was important to have you on here is because you care a lot about whitewashing, media misrepresentation. Holy cow! Let me find my words. I'm usually better than this. My God.
It happens.
Yeah, and as am I, because what I find is that both of our countries are so guilty of trying to erase us that on very relevant conversations to have indigenous led media, we're not seeing it. And worse, I'm seeing that they were doing vigils and such all across the states, and it wasn't indigenous led. I'm so upset about this whole situation at so many levels. And I thought, well, I know I'm not alone. And, I've been crying since it happened last week. And I thought it was really important that we talked about it. And I'm not sure, for folks who don't know, I haven't said their name yet because in some cultures, you don't say people's name after they die. And I
Right.
mean, it's a hashtag. It's, and that makes it hard. So maybe if you're comfortable, we can just talk about Nex, if you're
Yes.
comfortable using the term or their name Nex. And
Yes.
part of the reason why I want to say Nex is because I've even their GoFundMe is dead named. And we all know you never dead name somebody who has transitioned.
Mhm.
And it looked like they were in just learning how to do that and using they and them, but like a lot of the media written stuff all uses their dead pronouns.
Mm.
And so yeah, I wanted to talk about this because I'm in Canada, and I see some of it, but sometimes the American stuff I don't always understand. So
Right.
here in Canada, we had the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Zero Canadians read the volumes of reports. I did in my book club. So there's like five of us I know have read it.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah. And in it, they're very clear, after they couldn't do the Indian residential school programming, they
Hmm.
just invented social workers so that they
Hmm.
could continue their genocide against our people.
Yeah.
And ironically, still people think social workers are like people you hold in high regard, like, but
No.
these are the same people who love police, right? So
Hmm.
obviously have never been affected by colonial policy, violence, and trauma instituted by the colonizers. And whether they're social workers, teachers, or police. And of course, this is all of them involved in this case because this poor child was part of the Choctaw Nation, but
Mm.
being fostered through the Cherokee Nation, it sounded like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's my understanding of it. And apparently I believe the chief of the Choctaw Nation made a very insensitive distinction about Nex's mother being enrolled, but not Nex. And it's like I mentioned this because very recently I was approached by another journalist about wanting to cover the Pretendian list, and the journalist was not native. And I was very much like, this is way too complicated of a conversation for you to even try to understand because it's so deeply personal
Yeah.
and complicated to every indigenous person,
Yeah.
and everybody's got mixed feelings about it and not everybody agrees on it, and it's not juicy gossip.
Yeah.
It's damaging and it's traumatizing and it's
Yeah.
not taken as seriously, I think, you know um by non-natives.
Yeah.
So to try and cover this and for what? Like, what are you getting out of this?
Yeah.
And, and then to see that right after I was just approached uh by a chief, I'm like, this runs deep and it's very serious, and it just kind of demonstrated how out of your league you are in trying to talk about this, and
Yeah.
how in poor taste it can be given what we're about to discuss.
Absolutely. So I'll just be clear with you. I
Mhm.
have been in the circles of violence against Indigenous women forever. I mean, I'm Native. I grew up in domestic violence. So it's a part of my life. And even in those circles, you know, the last 10 years has just been calling out the transphobia and homophobia that's in our circles, and why Two Spirit are a part of this conversation. And we had a national inquiry here in Canada, and 2 volumes of the report, beautifully written. In our book club, we then did the national action plan for the 2S LGBTQ. It was a whitewash version, but it was so poorly written. I was like, it's just really, really awful. I've been talking about racism within the 2S LGBTQ community for about 10 years. And what I've been seeing is a, perpetuation, continuation of that. And I really felt like the National Action Plan was exactly that, where it was like we had this beautiful report in the national inquiry that would help all white people, all QT BIPOC, and it was kind of disregarded so that we could have a whitewash national action plan that wasn't even close. They didn't even have the same acronym consistent throughout the entire report, for example. It's so awful. It's not even worth your time reading. So, but our book club did them. We did the national inquiry first, and we were like, is such poor taste, this national action plan. So and I do that. I give that background for folks who may not understand. Like, the problem with intersectionalities is that, like, I've been attacked so many times by white gay men. I can't even, my list is too long to possibly make a list of. We have a Black activist in this area, and whenever they're punching down on her, I'm like, man, of all the things you could be putting your effort towards, you just outed yourself to me as a racist. And that's just so common where I live right now in Calgary, Alberta. um this person, she's just blacklisted, which is ironic. I mean, this is a person that's doing community care and not taking all of the, white man's money. And that's really what's pissing off the community. It's like, well, how come they're not going through the proper paperwork and becoming the nonprofit? That's my English people.
That's right.
Yeah, yeah. And of course a lot of the gay organizations, same thing, right? They just they're colonial, they think colonial, they want to do everything colonial. So the idea of having, Indigenous circles and Indigenous conversations, like, this is not even in their realm, because they're like, oh my God, a Native, you still exist here.
Yeah. If they even know. Usually, like, it is kind of lonely, like being in a lot of leftist spaces, feminist spaces, queer spaces, because there is a lot of unchecked anti-Indigenous racism. And it's on I would like to talk about this later, but it kind of like exists on a spectrum. When I talk about anti-Native racism, people, a lot of non-natives seem to think that there's an acceptable version, an acceptable form, a harmless form, and then the real bad stuff, as if these things aren't connected. Also cats.
Hey,
Also
kitty.
kitties. This is Piku.
Hi,
Hello.
Piku.
Get over
No,
here. Just
it is
right here.
medicine, absolute medicine.
She
So
is.
so with Nex and this conversation that I am seeing, I'm seeing a fully erasure of Indigenous identity. The trans community has really just taken it as their flagship for political purposes, and in my opinion are using Nex as an example of why their rights matter, not realizing that violence against Indigenous youth is just like an everyday reality. And a comfort that they they don't understand. I don't understand. I never understood it as an Indigenous youth feeling safe. That's never been my reality. So for me, I really don't appreciate the misuse of Nex and Nex's death, and not accounting for the racism as part of the reason. I agree with everyone that it
Mhm.
should be a hate crime, but I think there's an intersectionality of as Indigenous, trans, as well as just the Indigenous component, the
Right.
anti-settler colonial violence, that's just being missed, not to mention the violence from the state with apprehension, like all of it. So what are some things that you're seeing that you wish were being said more about next?
I'm gonna try and like kind of stay within my lane as far as like I am cisgendered, I am, a cisgendered woman. So I can't speak so much on trans issues or even two-spirit non-binary issues. But it does hurt me very much as a Native woman, especially someone who identifies as Indigiqueer and as the anti of a gender non-conforming nibbling, like niece, but nibbling, gender non-conforming. And as the friend of many queer and trans and gender non-conforming friends who are both Native and non-Native.
Yeah,
And more than anything, this specific incident, let's see. Let me just dial it back a bit. Because you were asking what am I seeing missing from the dialogue. And I have notes actually. Let me
that's great.
you got some editing to do because I got
No,
notes.
it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's beautiful. And frankly, like I'm in the same position,
Mhm.
but except I'm straight. So like I want to make that clear too. I'm a straight
Mhm.
cis, and my child is identifying in the queer world, as well as I have two trans nieces.
Mhm.
Um and they go by she hers now.
Yeah.
And I anyway, please go ahead.
Okay. So as far as exclusion, like media exclusion of Indigenous people. So as of yesterday, Brian Smith was found guilty on all charges for the murders of Kathleen J. Henry and Veronica R. Abochuk, I believe is how you pronounce her name. So two First Nations are Alaska Native women. And this was the first I have ever heard of it. And like the court case is over. He's guilty on all charges, and this is the first I've ever heard of it. I found out about it on TikTok, where someone someone played the audio from the film that the video he recorded of him murdering one of these women.
Oh my
And
God.
I just a portion of it, and I just heard the audio, and it filled me with so much hate and rage and anger. I can't even put it into words. And that was the first time I had heard of it. And I guess it has been going on. I suppose it happened in 2019. And the details of it are horrible. Hearing it was horrible, And then on the other side of the spectrum, like I said, the not so bad racism because it's not murder and torture, you know, um, with respect, a video essayist named Princess Weeks, who I do respect and I do enjoy her work very much, and I've been following her for a long time, but she released a hour-long video essay discussing racism and sexism in Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, the books and the movies, but did not mention the character of Emily Young, who is a Native woman who was attacked and nearly murdered by her boyfriend for rejecting him. And in the books and in the movies, they say that her injuries were so bad that they had to lie to the police and say that she was mauled by a bear. So her boyfriend did that to her because werewolves or whatever, but her face and her arm, her body is permanently destroyed, like scarred from being mauled by her boyfriend. And I don't understand how that is something that you can just forget or overlook for as much as the conversation surrounding abuse and misogyny in Twilight, the native woman with the permanently disfigured face is overlooked even when the evidence of her abuse is right there. And
And I'm going to add to that and just say
mm,
during Super Bowl, like we
mhm,
had the 49ers, which is
yep.
basically based off of the gold rush of people who
Mhm,
murdered a ton of natives in order to have the gold rush,
yeah.
and the Redskins. Like I hate even saying that word at all.
Mhm.
Like it makes me angry that they have
Oh, not the
the
Redskins, the
Chiefs,
Chiefs.
the
Yeah.
Chiefs as
Yeah.
the and this tomahawk chop,
Chop.
like
Hmm.
just totally acceptable anti-indigenous racism right there,
Mm.
right? Like it's so, but it's not the bad stuff. It just
Yeah.
makes me and you and our children feel like crap, and we have the highest rates of suicide. We're just overlooking that, right? Even though
Yeah.
we have data to prove that this is bad, but their feelings matter.
Even though a famous feminist is dating the star football player on the Chiefs and is attending this and is all about fighting the patriarchy, but fuck
Same with
Native women.
Alyssa Milano. She owns it. Like fuck
I
her.
hate her. Fuck her.
Fuck her too.
That's right. Fuck you too. I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, it's crappy that we have to put up with all of this racism. But just on a quick note, I
Mhm.
have watched 2 episodes of the new Avatar, and yeah, just like instant crying watching it. So just loving that.
I only saw the first episode because just a lot is going on, but
Yeah.
um I'm so proud. Even though Katara's character is toned down a lot
Yeah.
from the sassier, fiery, angry, hot-headed, but still hopeful and still loving character from the cartoon, I don't care. I am ride or die for Gioventio. I hope I pronounced her name right.
Yeah.
And I am just so happy to see a native actress, a young native actress in a role like this, in a show like this. She kind of looks just like my little baby niece.
Right.
So I'm like, I hope that this is your hero
Oh,
when you grow up.
100%. My daughter or my child point like was that's beans because we watched beans. I can't remember if they ended up watching it in school or not, but yeah, we watched it, and so it's wonderful to watch. I agree. So yeah, I just wanted to throw that out there too, because like I really struggle with watching mainstream media for the simple
Mhm.
reason that they get it wrong all the time. But then
Yes.
with this Avatar one, at least they got it somewhat right. So
Somewhat like White
yeah.
Sokka. White Sokka can fuck off, but I never
Yeah.
liked Sokka anyways. This unpopular Avatar opinion. So
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
white dude was never going to be the deal breaker because you're playing my least favorite character anyway. So, but
Yeah, totally.
I'm here for Baby Girl, and I'm
Yeah.
also here for Amber Midthunder's character, even though I haven't gotten
Haven't
to
seen
that
it
yet.
yet. Yeah. Same
Yeah.
with Nathaniel Arcan. He's a kind of a big guy here in Alberta. So I'm really looking forward to seeing that's going to be Katara's dad. So I've seen, because on native Twitter, you can't stop it, right? Like, so
Right.
he's posted pictures of himself as in that character. So I'm like, oh, like
Bay.
I know.
I mean, there is kind of a conversation to be had, especially with White Sokka. And it is a lot of I understand people have like different feelings on this. I'm a little bit more lenient just because they're, native actors are a little bit hard to come by, and finding new talent, is sometimes not realistic for these showrunners. So I get it. I can't overlook that, the water tribe is predominantly is very much Inuit or Inuk coded.
Yeah.
or circumpolar tribe societies,
Yeah.
coded and inspired. And then you have non-Inuit actors who are playing characters that are supposed to be that. And most of them are pretty light skinned too, I noticed. Whereas the characters in Avatar, they're not very dark skinned, but still, noticeably brown as opposed to the other characters. But again, that I really am just so proud of all the natives who worked on this show and that they get to be part of Avatar. And I mean, it's not a hot mess yet. It's more of like a mixed bag, but I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I believe Gilwento can save the world.
Right on. Yeah, no, I'm happy about that, but I just like here we have a serious issue of somebody being murdered who's trans. And the rhetoric that's coming from the colonizers, both in Canada and the States, from our elected officials that are really perpetuating this hate. And I mean, the thing that I call everybody who does that a Nazi, because that's what the Nazis did. The first thing they do is go after the trans community. And then everybody gets their panties in a bunch and they're like, oh my God, we're not Nazis. I just don't understand it. And it's like, shut the fuck up and
If
just
you
pull
quack
your
like a
head out
duck.
of your ass and actually read about it. Actually meet one of your trans family members, that cousin that you never hear from. Maybe there's a freaking reason, because you're filled with so much hate for something you don't even understand. I mean, I'm straight and cis, and I cannot wrap my head around the hate towards someone who's gay, someone who's trans at all. I can't. It doesn't threaten my existence. It doesn't
Right.
threaten my marriage. Like, I cannot wrap my head around it.
It costs nothing to just mind your business. And
Right?
like literally bottom line, it's like I don't know, I'm currently like on a Matrix binge right now. Like I'm revisiting it as an adult. Hi kitty. Also that was my dryer and my cat. No, stop it. Stop it. I'm sorry.
Don't be. It's great.
Oh, okay. So, yeah, I'm currently on a Matrix binge, just kind of rewatching it as an adult. And something I noticed, especially with the character of Agent Smith, is that when you do a lot of trans readings, basing this off of video essays by queer and trans bloggers or content creators, that Smith benefits from a system that he is has power in, but simultaneously hates it. And the cruelty he exhibits towards those who are unplugged from the matrix and get to experience this type of freedom and authenticity that he cannot have. It's rooted in envy and anger, and it becomes personal, even for a machine, and he like tells Morpheus in that scene, I hate it here. I need to get out, while simultaneously oppressing and killing people who hated it there and got out. And I wonder
Yeah.
how much of that is reflective in the policies that we're seeing from these men and women and people in positions of power who are oppressive towards, Black, Indigenous people of color, but also people of marginalized genders and identities. Because even though our lived experience can be dangerous, there is a sense of community and a sense of freedom and authenticity that we get to experience that I don't think they get to, and therefore we're dangerous.
Yeah, I hear that. I think those are some great points. I never really thought of Matrix in that way, but when
So
you said it, it makes
good.
so much more sense. Holy. And to that idea, like we it's not funny, but we have a lot of politicians here that are basically in the closet, and we all know it, and have proof of it in some cases. And and for me, I'm not going to out somebody even if they're a shit
Mhm.
ass. So
Right.
you know what I mean? God, just I wish we could, but I just also, this is their choice and their decision. But I here in Alberta, we have had this premier, and his brother does all of this like conversion therapy stuff in the churches. And so a lot of people say, well, he went through the program and he's closeted, but like all of his staffers are gay men, young gay men. And yeah, it's gross because in one hand he's going after these folks, and on the other hand, you know, we all know. And so we have one of the, like, a lot of people don't know Katie Lang is actually a Blackfoot, hey, half Blackfoot.
Huh.
And yeah, so she went relentlessly after this former premier. And thank heaven for her. We just retweeted the shit out of her. Because, like, you know, she's gay, open about it and talking about it. And I don't want to out him, but I mean, Jesus Christ, if you're gonna go after marginalized groups, then fuck you. So
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and yeah, he has a long history of that in lots of different ways. I could go on and on, but the point I'm trying to make is that we have folks like these in positions of power, and Nex is like the collateral damage of all of this hate that's circulating. And I would argue they're not bringing in race, and if they would, that would that would explain part of it as well. And here in Canada, this is already 10 years ago when Loretta Saunders went missing and was found murdered. At first, the mainstream media was covering it 24/7 until they found out she was part Inuk. And when they found that out, it just was media silence until
Mhm.
they found her dead body. And that is one of those things that I think that I've been kind of wondering, is that what's going to happen with Nex? Is that, is, you know, when people start talking about the fact that they were Indigenous, or will that be when they quit talking about it in general, right? Because they just can't handle having a conversation about racism in a white supremacist world.
So, I would say the symbol for MMIW is the red handprint over the mouth, right?
In the
And
States, yeah.
yeah, in the States, right there. So I think that perfectly sums up how mainstream media and politicians and public figures in general handle and treat Indigenous issues as a whole, but especially how it treats anti-Native racism. I run a blog on Tumblr and a page on Twitter called Your Fave is Anti-Native. And it's a list of public figures, or just provided, you know, examples of public figures who have said and done something that was racist against Indigenous people. And just like the examples that I listed with the Brian Smith case and even Princess Weeks, you know, like it can vary, it can change, you know, or it can vary. It can range from cultural appropriation to calls for genocide to using slurs or being part of a football team that is named after uh, colonizer murderers, or to physically attacking and killing people. You know, it's a spectrum. It's not
Yeah.
one size fits all, you know what I mean? And they're all connected. But
Yep.
the thing that I noticed, especially all of my life, but is more easily documented here on Twitter and on Tumblr, is that the racist person usually never apologizes, no matter how much they're called out for
Yeah.
it, if they're called out for it at all, but even if they're called out for it,
Yeah.
is that they won't lose fans, they won't lose money, they won't get fired, they won't get reprimanded by any higher ups if there are any, they won't lose their jobs, they won't face any consequences. So there's no need in their mind to apologize for any of it because they've got nothing to lose. And whatever racist thing that they had to say about natives, they're not going to lose fans or support, and they'll get away with it,
Yep.
and they're just kind of waiting for us to shut up about it.
Yeah.
And when I think of the school, the Owasso, I believe is what it's called, Owasso High School, where this took place, and I think about their lack of action, their negligence, their total disregard for the Native non-binary student who was killed after being attacked in their school. I'm seeing the same thing.
Yeah.
Silence, radio silence. We are just now finding out about this, and it happened like Nex was passed away on the 8th. And we're finding out about this now because when you visit any of their social media platforms, any of them, the main website, their YouTube, their Facebook, their Twitter, any of it, there is no mention for the past 2 weeks that a student died. You would never know.
I know.
You would
Sad.
never know. Even when they were pressured into giving a statement, they spent like 90% of it just covering their ass and setting the record straight because of the misinformation. But there was no indication. No, there wasn't as much energy and time and work put into the loss of this child that was
Mhm.
in their care. There was no mourning. There was no guilt. There was no remorse. There was,
Yeah.
they were cheering on football teams and talking about bunt cakes and stuff for 2 weeks after their student was killed. And it's like, how do you do that? How is that not something? There's not one memorial, there's not one rest in peace, you will be missed, you were special, you were loved. Like, I understand there are things that you cannot talk about in an investigation, like an ongoing investigation, but it would have cost nothing for them to say our a student passed away this morning and we are deeply sad. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just anything
Yeah.
like that. They are just quiet. And Indian country showed up fast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. When they found out that Next was Choctaw,
Yeah.
showed up quick. It's like a bunch of strangers showed up and made posts and made visuals and made art and started hashtags. And the school who saw this child every single day couldn't even do that.
Yeah. You know, I have a real love-hate relationship with so many institutions, and education is just another one of them. Here in so I'm in Calgary, Alberta, Canada, and we've been working with so my book club's been running since 2016. And some of the settlers are actually like, geez, I wish we could do more. And it's like, okay. So there was a architect of the Indian residential school named Langevin
Mhm.
here in Calgary, even though he wasn't from here or anything. There was this real move in the 60s to like rename things after prominent um, settlers in the
Mhm.
hopes to be proud of who we are and where we come from. Of course, erasing indigenous realities, right?
Yeah, you
So
guys can't be proud.
yeah, yeah.
You guys
So
can't remember where you came from.
no. So this guy named Langevin was the architect of all the Indian residential schools. He was the infrastructure guy. So they named a bridge after him and a school after him. And so, it wasn't just me 10 years before we were pushing to get the name changed. Other people were questioning and such. And these institutions have a great way of being like, well, this is probably just a little pet project for these little guys. So we'll just tell them for a year, you can be a part of our student council. And yeah, that's just great activism you're doing right there without any fucking real intention of changing the name or anything like that. So
No.
finally, the Calgary Board of Education got shamed into changing the name when the voices from the graves came loud across Canada. And I was pissed about the whole fucking thing at that point in time because the TRC had a whole goddamn book on the missing children and the unmarked graves and the necessary steps that needed to be done in order to get moving. And that was really the impetus for our group to be like, we got to do more, because like there's a whole book of like, this is what you need to do, and nobody's doing it. So anyway, they finally got shamed into changing the name and did. And so we started the Reconciliation Action Group. And, we've been trying to work with these stupid institutions. And there's a long history to talk about, but like one of the other Indigenous moms, her kid got the shit kicked out of him at one of the schools. And the board for that, they're like doing the same thing, total media silence. And the mom was like, no, my kid was almost murdered. Like, we're charging these fucking kids with assault. And yeah, the school just does not give a shit. And worse, the sister one of the kids like that are part of this family
Mhm.
got treated so poorly by some of the teachers that she really thought loved her. You know, like that's the kind of shit that our kids have to put up with every single day at these stupid institutions where it's like you misplace your trust in adults. And so like that moment I know has changed her forever. She'll never trust a teacher like she did before,
No.
thanks to these fucking racists who refuse to address their racism, and they'll sit and cry with their tissues like I'm so not a racist, but they just can't pick up a stupid book like White Fragility or the million other books there are from Black
Mhm.
authors who talk about racism. They just won't do it. And we have a lot of Indigenous books here, a lot of Indigenous articles, folks like yourself who blog, like this is what you can do to be an ally. And it's just like, oh my God, I can't believe you guys still exist. That's where we're at, right? Like,
They don't want us to exist. I think
no,
that's
no, and
oh
that's
no.
clear. Yeah. And I
Yeah.
can talk about that in other ways, but Jesus. So this poor little Nex is being caught in the biggest political snowstorm, but people are so blind to it. It's just shocking to me how people are unaware how foster is actually quite evil, how, you know, the education systems are institutions there to protect themselves and not the students.
Mhm.
And yeah, we're going to talk about football games instead of freaking the life of a child. And don't even get me started on the school shooting shit. That's,
Mhm.
I can't, we won't even go there, but Jesus.
No. Yeah, I've been getting a lot of gross comments on Twitter, like none of which I'm surprised by. I should preface that,
Yeah.
but my post about Nex, I um mistakenly called them Cherokee, because I think a lot of us just kind of assumed, and it's like, you know, uh, wow, I zoned out. Hang on, I think a lot of us a lot of us assumed probably that they were Cherokee because they were indigenous, they were non-binary, and they were on the Cherokee reservation. So,
Yeah.
two and two together, we kind
Honest
of,
mistake. Yeah.
yes, understandable mistake. And then when we were corrected, we adjusted.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but originally, like when I said, Next Benedict was Cherokee, they were indigenous, you cannot leave that information out. It was with the intention of addressing that this was a crucial part of their identity. Trans, indigenous and trans non-bear, wow. Trans indigenous and trans non-binary individuals like are subjected to so much violence
Yeah.
specifically because they are trans and indigenous. Like you
Yeah.
cannot separate the two, they're connected.
Yeah.
So I've been getting a lot of shit on Twitter over this, and I'm not surprised, but it's like the adult in me is like, how are you guys acting like such garbage when a kid is dead? Like,
Yeah.
how can
Yeah.
you do that? And originally, when we mentioned that Next was indigenous, people wanted to be like, why are you bringing race into this and treating it like it's oppression Olympics and not intersectionality? It's like, and then other ones are trying to derail it with one of the commenters, let's see, they were like, what's the race of the attackers? Does their race matter? It's like, well, it's a hate crime, no
Yeah.
matter what they are. It's like, are their attackers non-native? Then that's probably a native hate crime.
Yeah.
Um, and a homophobic, transphobic hate crime. I'm like, if the attackers are native, then it's still a hate crime because they were targeted for their transness, and
Yeah.
lateral violence
Yeah.
happens all the time.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't know what argument they think they're winning here.
I don't
And I
know.
don't understand why the focus, I mean, I do understand, but it's like theoretically, why is the focus on winning an online argument when
Mm-hmm.
someone's dead? Why
Yeah.
is that your biggest concern?
Mm-hmm.
And I get it. And it's like, I understand trolls are trolls. I understand that. I even like maybe it's some shitty edgelord 13-year-old who's on like, forums or whatever, just trying to be cool or whatever. And it's like, I get it. Maybe you'll grow out of that. Right now, you're kind of a dick, but there's just as many adults. Someone is messaging me. There are just as many adults who never grew out of that. Stop talking. I'm sorry. My Discord keeps bring.
I can't hear it. The Zoom
Yeah.
is really great for that. So it
Oh, thank
really
goodness,
takes
because they
out
were.
all that background stuff that you're worried about.
Yeah,
I'm not even noticing it until you bring
yeah.
it up.
Okay, thank God, because I
Yeah.
thought it was bothering you, but it's also like
No, no.
distracting me. I'm like, stop. But oh, what the hell was I saying? I was on a roll, and then there are adults who never grew out of that mentality either, and I think that's part of the problem because then they grow up and vote for people who push these laws, who vote for people or follow people and boost the accounts and the platforms of racists like libs of TikTok, among others, or vote for Donald Trump.
Yeah. Yeah, I know.
It's-
I'm really glad you brought up libs of TikTok because I know that people are talking about that hate that they have started and continued. And I just wanted to let you know, we have an anti-trans movement here in Alberta, and it's through these Alberta parent unions, et cetera, et cetera. Ironically, their spokesperson from Oklahoma. I
Of
met him.
course.
He just lives south of me here, not like a few houses down, really. And it just sucks because it's like, you're allowed to be a Christian bigot from the States, come up here and spread your bigotry, and everybody eats it up here because they just don't want to. I don't know. I can't explain that. But is there anything else that you wanted to bring up today for today's episode?
Let's see. Well, there was a conversation surrounding whether or not cause of death was even from the beating. Like it's it's driving me crazy. It's like whether or not cause of death was from the beating or if they had a pre-existing medical condition, as if that matters. It's like the child entered your school. The child entered the school in good health. They left your school in bad health.
Unable
And
to
then the
walk.
next day. Yes. It's like another conversation is whether or not Nex was actually bullied by these girls because I guess the camera footage from or the security footage from the school was released. The body cam footage from the police officer was released, and then I guess the 911 call, which I cannot listen to. I just not in the right headspace for that, especially after the Brian Smith thing. That was released too, but they're trying to say that Nex wasn't actually bullied by these girls. They were just, she didn't know who Nex wasn't bullied by these girls. They didn't know who they were. But the girls followed them into the bathroom and were being dicks. I can understand. When someone
Yeah.
is, targeting and they might not say it outright. You know what I mean? They might not be like, oh, look at, and spouting slurs and everything, but they're laughing at you, in their group,
Yeah, I know. You can tell
Yes.
when people give you the hate gaze. I
Oh, for
mean, you and I
sure.
grow up with it, so
Yeah.
it's really interesting to me to watch white people being like, "Oh my God, I expressed some sentiments for the Palestinians, and now my neighbors don't like me."
Oh my God.
Tough. I like
Yeah.
when has my neighbors ever liked me? Never.
Never.
The sooner I'm eliminated, the sooner they feel better about living here. So yeah,
Mm,
imagine that hate gaze.
yeah. And it's like even the other conversation that they're having about whether because Nex threw water at them and then they proceeded to attack. And it's like, in addition to the neglect and the dismissiveness, now we're also being actively gaslit.
Yeah.
It's Darvo in action where they're trying to,
Yeah.
you were the aggressor the entire time. Even the police officer in the the body cam video was all like, well, if you press charges, technically they can press charges against you because you threw water at them and then they were defending themselves. It's like, it is not defending yourself when three of you kill one person.
Yeah. I know
Yes.
I did want to unpack the one about there being, a possible pre-existing condition. And I'll say this because I think it's really important that a lot of Indigenous people have autoimmune disorders and health issues directly from the very testing experiments that were done on us, so that little white kids could have vaccines and have the Canadian Food Guide and have
Birth
guidelines.
control.
Yeah,
Yep.
yeah, that was all done on us so that they could have a healthy life. So when we show up with these intergenerational traumas and intergenerational health issues, suddenly we're the problem. No, motherfuckers, you literally caused these health issues that are causing, so I don't even know if they had a pre-existing health condition, but it doesn't fucking matter. You had three kids who beat the shit out of her or them, and then they died. So
Yeah.
I don't care if they splashed water in the girls' washroom. At the end of the day, they beat her to death, and that should be enough. But in the States especially, they have such a long history of like justifying lynching, justifying slavery, justifying oppression. So like it's not surprising to me to hear this bullshit. But and again, it's coming from authorities who actually have inherent anti-Indigenous bias, and that is never talked about in the justice system, the policing system, the education system, nothing. So like I'm just gonna throw that out there, because even if they did, they got the crap beat out of them and died, and that should be enough.
It should be. And just the fact that the school did nothing. Like,
They never do.
didn't.
I see it here all the time. Like we have coalitions of like black kids who get their dreads like ripped out of their heads, and everybody's cool with it. It's fine because they're black. It's fine. Like it's just disgusting. We have like these Catholic schools that are like, black kids can't wear do-rags to school because they're gang affiliated.
Oh
And I'm
my
like,
God.
we're not in LA. Like, where do you get stupidity? But
My God.
honestly, they're doing a gangs in schools presentation in my daughter's school, and I just want to they're trying to really justify policing in schools because they really want to do what they're doing in the States, where they have a cop in every school that can sit around and do absolutely nothing and other than policing, and making all the Indigenous, all the black kids, all of the brown kids, all of the non-white kids feel scared. And we have tons of evidence to prove that, but they conveniently want to eliminate that and just be like, no, we're going to start good relations in schools. And it's like, no, you're not. You have never apologized for a goddamn thing you've ever done. So, no.
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's like when taking it back to when I used to work at a gym. I was a coach. I taught like basic gymnastics and like obstacle courses and stuff like that, but I looked over so many kids, again, between the ages from 3 to 12, boys and girls. And just I cannot get over the way the Owasso High School teachers, like the staff, just did not react to this death publicly. And it's like there are moments when you're teaching, like you build these relationships between these kids and they trust you so much. It's like even the ones you bump heads with, even the ones that, you kind of struggle with, they trust you so much because you're the adult. And especially with stuff like gymnastics, like a mistake can be catastrophic.
Yeah.
And even in the event where someone breaks their arm or someone hits their head or something, you have to fill out a what's called an incident report detailing, this is what happened. This is how they were acting. This is the area on their body that was hurt. This is the steps that was taken, specifically so that you can, if it ever gets brought to court, you can save your ass and be like, we did this. This is what was done to the student. This is how long this, you know what I mean? It's like, so the fact that, to my knowledge, none of that was even done. blows my mind, especially when it was a head injury. Like concussions are no joke. Like brain aneurysms, anything like that are no joke. And it's like you didn't call an ambulance, you didn't,
Nope.
and then didn't say anything after they died. It's like I tell you with all of my heart, like, you know, if something like that would have like something that what happened to Next would have happened to any of my students and my former place of employment wouldn't have said anything, because I'm sure that there are teachers who want to say something and can't publicly or are pressured not to. It's like job be fucking damned. I saw this student every single day. I hugged them. I like spotted them on their backflip or something. And I loved them. And for them to say nothing, like nothing, it's like I expect hate and contempt and apathy and dismissiveness from racist adults and online trolls and whomever, but I expect a teacher to at least lie
Yeah.
and pretend to give a fuck,
Yeah.
about their student
Yeah.
so much. It's like this poor baby deserved so much better, just deserved so much better. And they should be here, and none of this should have happened.
Yeah. I know. I
Yes.
feel this. I feel you. And I just yeah, I just wish that the gay community would recognize that racism is a factor. And I sure wish the schools would understand how much. Yeah, I seen one of your Republican fellows use the term dirty filth in regards to this, and I just was like, man,
They're dirty and filthy.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
you bastards are.
yeah, I'm so saddened. It just it shows, the self-preservation indigenous have always had to do. Like we have to protect our youth because it is clear these systems will never do it.
No.
And anyway, I really appreciate you coming on. Is there anything else you'd like to add today?
No, just, I'm thinking of the family, I'm thinking of the mom, very recently, a friend of mine lost her brother to suicide.
Mm,
And just the devastation of the family, but specifically the mother who had
mm,
to bury her son or her baby was just the saddest thing I have ever experienced, I've ever witnessed. And I've lost my mother, so I know the pain of losing a parent, and just the trauma attached to that. But to lose your child was I couldn't even fathom until I saw that at the funeral. So my heart does very much go out to Nex's family, Nex's mother, and all the other queer and native and trans kids out there who feel utterly alone and utterly failed and feel like people don't give a shit about them. And it's like, you do, babies, like you have community. It's like
yeah,
I know it doesn't feel like it, but you have community. And it's like native Twitter and native Tumblr and all these things may have all of their problems, but we got each other's backs, when the cards are down.
yeah. On issues
And
like this, always. I
yes,
I get so frustrated having people not understand the gravity of how our elected leaders are literally causing our deaths, and the disconnect it seems to take for people to see it and experience it. So I really appreciate you coming on. I appreciate you asking that money be put into Nex's GoFundMe on behalf of you coming on our show today. So
yes.
thank you for that. And I did send you the email to show we did it, so that way that
Yeah.
you wouldn't feel like it was just words. It's not just words to me either, and I'm hoping that other people understand the gravity of their words, and dead naming, not using proper pronouns. Here I was taught that my language we had to invent she and he, in Satu Dene because it was always they, them. So I'm trying to go to they and them. My child, who identifies as a lesbian, is trying to go to they and them for this reason as well. And I think that we have to understand, like, they, them just needs to be the default until proven otherwise. And I'd rather us all have problems saying he and she than they and them.
Of course. Yes.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you for coming on my show, and you're welcome back anytime. And for folks who follow me on Twitter, please know, um, I retweet you regularly because I think it's important to amplify each other. It is always shocking to me how many people don't amplify each other. And it's like you and so many of native Twitter content creators make such great content. Same with TikTok as well. So my hope is that we can all kind of like encourage that a bit, and hopefully folks will watch you either on YouTube here or listen to one of our audio podcasts. And yeah, I always encourage people to go to our YouTube so that you can see, hey, this is what we look like.
Yep, this is us.
Thanks so much for coming on. I'm going to do my exit, and you're welcome to chime in as I go. So thank you.
Okay.
Awesome. So Stonewall Recovery Center is having their gala coming up. They are working really hard at trying to actually have the bricks and mortar. So that's what it's called. I'm working on Two-Spirit names that need to be said and memorialized as part of their commitment to the National Inquiry's calls to justice and reconciliation in general. So please feel free to message me or email me if you want their name added. I did have a few folks that didn't know if people were even native. So sorry, folks, that doesn't count. We do the Trans Day of Remembrance. We do other memorials for non-Indigenous, but people have to understand that there is an intersectionality here of colonization that causes anti-Indigenous bias, which is why the Two-Spirit are disproportionately not even mentioned in our marches, etc. Our book club is coming up. Our next book club is on the question of Palestine. So that's every month on the second Monday. Please come join us. If you're in the Calgary area, please join the Reconciliation Action Group. If you are not in the Calgary area, you should be looking around you and going, is there a reconciliation committee I can be a part of or start one? Because these calls to action aren't going to happen until every citizen starts addressing their anti-Indigenous bias and starts putting forward those calls to action in a good way in their businesses, etc. I'm proud that this podcast gives solution and cultural safety training, first aid, and all of them to create a safer space for Indigenous people, people of color, those with disabilities, and to us LGBTQ to speak. According to the 2023 Quality of Life Report from the Calgary Foundation, 88% of racialized Calgarians feel uncomfortable or out of place because of their religion, ethnicity, skin color, culture, language, accent, gender, or sexual orientation, which is up from 75% in 2022. 84% of racialized Calgarians believe racism exists, and 66% of non-racialized Calgarians do. I'm sure those numbers are going to go up after this issue with Palestine. Thank you to authors Cheryl Ward, Chelsea Branch, and Alicia Fridkin of hereToHelp.bc.ca. They have a whole section on what is Indigenous cultural safety and why I should care about it. Their work and those cultural action tools are available, so please support Indigenous work like that as part of your settler understandings and reconciliation work. I'm just lucky enough to repeat and highlight it here. Internalized racism and lateral violence is another form of oppression that Indigenous and equity-seeking groups experience by the structure of racism imposed on these lands. You can go to racialequitytools.org. They have tons of resource files and a great section on what is internalized racism by Donna Bevins. Also, if you can give them $5, that would be great. Do's and don'ts for bystander intervention by American Friends Service Committee. That's afsc.org. They have tons of information as well. I wish anybody that would follow me on social media would watch the anti-racism organizational leader for the city of Calgary give the committee a presentation on the journey of becoming an anti-racism leader. Why everyone doesn't want to be an anti-racism leader, I have no concept of. Calgary Black Lives Matter activists Taylor McNally and Adora Nofort are legally being targeted. Please follow Stop the Stack YYC and be a part of those actions as well. Indigenous people have been talking about our issues, sharing our traumas in reports, commissions, and in public hearings, just so it can be regularly disregarded. No more. Honor our words, honor the treaties. Listen to politicians and their policies and platforms. If they don't recognize the equity seeking in their budgets with Gender Equity Plus, if they're cutting violence prevention programs, services, Indigenous education, uterus health choices, gay straight alliances, lacks of human rights for migrants, immigrants, folks with disabilities, know that your vote is going to directly negatively impact equity seeking groups. Demand that they implement the 94 calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission report, the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Aboriginal Peoples, the multiple reports on child welfare reform, and the 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women, Girls, and Two-Spirit. Provincially, we have the 113 Pathways to Justice. Municipally, we have the White Goose Flying Report. Denying all these reports is a form of abuse called gaslighting. Our people are experiencing extreme racism in every institution with multiple reports that say the same thing. Demand changes from these stupid politicians. They don't understand colonialism, racism, privilege, sexism. They have no business running. This should be understood by all politicians, parties, community associations, sports clubs, education systems. Google articles on how non-Indigenous Canadians can become allies, because unfortunately there's multiple of them, yet we're not seeing the allyship. Stephanie Harp and I talked a lot about the Aboriginal Alert, as well as the Missing Children Society of Alberta apps. Recently, this week, in the last, 24 hours, the Calgary Police said, we're not going to release any more names for missing children. So I don't really understand this step backwards, but this is where we're at as a society. So if you're not following Aboriginal Alert, you're not going to see it on the Calgary Police website. I never share it from there anyway. Just the way they do it. Anyway, women's homelessness.ca has a great statement on demanding urgent action to protect the lives of Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit and gender diverse people experiencing homelessness, but I have yet to hear anybody write their politicians for it. Federal housing advocate Marie Josie Houle released a report saying that the forced evictions put people at greater risk of harm and violate their Charter of Rights. The encampments have sprung up across Canada, and they amount to a national human rights crisis. And Alberta Premier Danielle Smith is dismissing calls from Canada's housing advocate to end the forced evictions of homeless people from these tent encampments. So this is literally a human rights crisis unfolding before our eyes, and I've yet to see anybody do anything about it. I can tell you that the Globe and Mail has reported that Alberta's drug deaths have soared to the highest level they've ever recorded, with nearly 1,700 recorded in 10 months of 2023. If you know somebody who's using substances, please do not use alone. Give out Narcan and naloxone as frequently as you possibly can to anyone you see unhoused. If you are using alone, you can contact the National Overdose Response Service at 1-888-688-NORS. You can download the Brave, Doors, or Lifeguard apps and make safety plans, because you matter and we want you here. If you're experiencing emotional distress after anything we talked about today in each talk, you can call the First Nation and Inuit Hope for Wellness helpline at 855-242-3310. It is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. They also have a website, hopeforwellness.ca, where they have those little text box. If more related to missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and Two-Spirit, the main topic of our conversation today, you can call 844-413-6649. And we also have the Indian Residential School Survivor and Family Hotline at 866-925-4419. The Native Youth Crisis Hotline is 877-209-1266. If you're non-Indigenous, guess what? 988. You got it across Canada. Boom. If you go to crisisservicescanada.ca, it just goes straight to 988 now. Kids Help Phone, 1-800-668-6868. In Alberta, we had a functioning 211. Sure, just go straight to this 988 number now. The following are two LGBTQ crisis supports that are in Canada. So kind of important to say if you're in the States, you can go to lifevoice.ca where they have tons of crisis supports. The Trans Lifeline in Canada, 877-330-6366. The Trevor Project for LGBTQ youth, 866-844-7386. Violence is my everyday reality. Every Indigenous generation has faced it. This is self-care, how I take my power back, how we have media representation so we can speak freely without tone police, leadership shaming, gaslighting questions, as many people don't want to hear Indigenous opinion. They sure like to tell us there, even though they know nothing about us, know nothing about colonialism, the constant surveillance of our people, our protests, our vigil, and our rights. I and many others share infos on microaggressions. It's just unacceptable to say them anymore. I hate the term microaggression. It's just racism. Learn about being trauma informed. Folks like me are dealing with internalized racism, gatekeeping, folks who survive off the status quo, folks who are in their trauma and stop people from doing the work. Internal, external racism is an everyday reality for me, Indigenous peoples, folks with disabilities, QT, BIPOC, and others. Masicho to my ancestors, to my granny and my mom, and what strength looks like through your example. I want to thank my dad for teaching me to be strong and blunt, my stepmom for showing me what a proud culture is through her Austrian family and teaching me to be a proud Calgarian second generation through her. I want to say thank you to my husband for producing and editing this show. On top of being my husband, my childhood friend, father of our child, he's been my support down this red road, witnessing decades of racism and sexism. And to our child, we are blessed to learn from you. We are honored you chose us. You give me daily accountability to be a better and stronger person. And I hope that my family will be proud in the future of us trying to discuss these present day issues in a way that they can understand. My Patreon account is Native Calgarian that you can pledge and support. Thank you, previous donors, for showing your support. If you value listening or watching and can afford to give, thank you. For those who cannot afford to give, I'd love to hear from you at nativeyyc@gmail.com, where you can send in your comments or questions. We also have a YouTube channel that you can go and subscribe. You can go to nativecalgarian.com for the latest podcasts and pin posts on social media. And I always want to end by giving side eye to those Calgary rabbits. You're lucky I'm not tradish. And my beautiful cousin would respond, or you'd be in my dish. Thanks, folks, for listening.